We can pause there. You'll see in the chat that I've posted the questions that we were just thinking about, and then also the quote by Adrienne Rich. And if you have the bandwidth, if you could turn on your video, that would be great. If you don't, we understand. That's also fine. Thanks. And would anyone like to share what thoughts come to them? How has anything I've talked about kind of resonated with you or led to your own ideas? And if so, be bold. Speak with us. Let us know what you're thinking. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
I'll throw some thoughts out. In thinking about writing out of our time, I had never considered beginning to work with fiction as a means of writing out of our time, but in this context, I think it might be. I've felt so scared and so rigid for the last 9 months of that there are specific things that I can do to stay safe, to not get sick, to not make anyone else get sick, or whatever the case may be, that writing about the real world felt impossible. It felt overwhelming. And so starting to create this world that is a fantasy world where I get to make the rules and the expectations and the thought processes has felt pretty cathartic in a way of like taking some more power and control back for myself.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so Megan's thinking about fiction and how the reality is too hard right now to think about. So creating fiction and making your own rules sounds like it's important, like it's a creative space for you. Yeah, thank you. Others? Yeah, Lauren, yeah.
Similarly, was thinking about fiction, but I'm more interested in how I can use this as like a way of writing a world or like a method of writing. And so I was looking at it as, okay, so if I have my epiphanies already that I know my characters need to get for like whatever progress in the plot or whatever, then I can write backwards in the descriptions to show more of the world around them, like what the political situation in this fictional world is, and build the world by using what needs to happen in the plot. So sort of taking it and flipping it on its head.
Which makes me think of Shields' work a little bit, right? Where I know I want to say something about misogyny. So I'm going to create this scene where a woman is taking in that misogynistic information in order to react and get a job, right? I'm not going to like write a bunch of exposition about that and explain it. I'm going to just really show some dialogue that makes that come to the fore. But what you're saying also has me thinking a little bit of Yoko Tawada's The Emissary. Have you read that book? Kind of coming out of like this idea of basically the world has ended as we know it. And she does quirky little things though to create a new world. So like no one has dogs anymore. So you have to go rent a dog. So the book opens with like the grandfather who will never die actually coming to get a dog at this rent a dog place because and that feeds into the larger points that she's trying to make. So kind of speaking to your idea of having this epiphany that you write towards through dialogue, through character, yeah, through the rules of that world. Yeah, that's great, Lauren. Does that lead to any other thoughts from others?
I just really enjoyed Adrienne Rich's existence and perspective right now with everything we're in this moment. And I think I'll take from this workshop to dive deeper into her work and her writing. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to share a copy. I have a copy of the PDF of The Arts of the Possible, so I wonder if I can even add that here. I'll try and add it right now. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Glenn has been putting things on Moodle too, I think.
So I'll add it there.
Yeah,
that's a proper place to put it. Thank you. I mean, and is there something specific, and I don't mean to push you, but just want to think through like how that idea might impact your own creative life. Like, are there practices you can think about that you're doing that feel like you're writing out of your time. And I'd love to hear what practices are sustaining you all right now and keeping you writing or getting you writing.
One of the things that I'm particularly focused on in my work is the interaction of the arts. So if I'm not in a place in a given moment to write, I might start painting or sketching or listening to a symphony while my journal's open next to me, or listening to AC/DC or Springsteen, or just the interaction of the different types of art, watching a dance performance. I think is very helpful because the arts all support each other. And sometimes it's helpful to pull back from what I focus on, which is generally poetry, and be more inclusive of the visual performing and audio arts.
Mm-hmm. I find that really sustaining too, Laura. Thank you. Do others rely on other art forms to kind of, I mean, I know, for instance, when I'm stuck writing and I can't find a word, I was telling Paul this the other day, I just still read books of poetry, just like kind of gorge on poetry for a while. And then suddenly I've got some language I didn't have before.
I kind of feel like when you mentioned like going for walks, I find that something that allows me to operate on one level, but lets the mind go free, it helps me a lot. So I like to do Tai Chi, or even I've gotten into this kind of weaving, doing this weaving. It's very methodical and rhythmic and stuff like that. And so that for me allows me to get wrapped up in that, because then I can admire the colors and the patterns and things like that. And then whatever comes from that comes from that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sue. Yeah. Other practices. Paul, how about you? What are you doing to sustain yourself as a writer these days?
I don't know. I've been, and I may have missed the point because I'm thinking maybe it's time to confront this time. It's time to meet the dragon, and you know, I probably wouldn't feel this way if Trump had won another 4 years. But I think that it's time to confront where we've been, and write about that, because this is something that we'll never. This is a point in human history that we won't forget. Mm-hmm. I mean, we just won't forget this time and what how it's had an impact on race and politics and all, so many things have been wrapped up in COVID that it's hard to unwrap it all and see how it fits together, if it fits together. I think it does. But anyway, that's what I was, as I listened and I read and thought about what you were saying, I thought, well, what about confronting this time and writing about this time? Something that, you know, we're still in this time. I don't care if we have a vaccine. I haven't seen a vaccine or any hope of a vaccine to this point. And that's what I want. Yeah. That's the hope.
Yeah, and I think your idea about confrontation is absolutely what Rich is after, right? And so part of the work seems to be naming where you are at in that process, how ready you are for that confrontation, right? Right. And so for some writers, that's going to be a huge stretch, but for others, you're like, no, I can lock eyes on this. I can see a pathway through writing about some specific aspect of this time. And I think that's what Kiese Lehman is doing. And I think that's exactly what Sharma Shields has been doing, right? Like those writers are absolutely confronting this time by writing about it, using the conditions and the constraints. I think you're absolutely echoing you're saying better what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's right on.
Well,
thank you.
It's my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Val, do you have anything you'd like to share?
I was thinking about this in a slightly different way, and then I think in a more focused way, but I think the things we write now will be of this time, whether we want them to be or not. I have been reflecting on writers who wrote during the Great Depression and who wrote during times of war and who write from different cultures. The writing is seen through that lens, even if their intention wasn't to write of their time. So that takes some burden off, I think, me trying to write about what we're experiencing. And then a practice I have found helpful, although it isn't something I have followed through all of this time. In March, I started keeping a journal of yesterday instead of today. So the things that happened yesterday, and for some reason that was just such another weight that was lifted off, that I could find a creative piece even sometimes when I was writing about yesterday in a way that I couldn't find when I was writing about today. And the pressure of journal writing and writing about today, to me, has been hard, I guess is the nicest way to say it. So so writing about yesterday, I have found, was a little easier.
That makes so much sense to me, because then you've got that like a little bit of a buffer of distance, like even with sleep, like it just gives you a little bit of rest through which to view something that happened yesterday, but it's still close enough that you can remember what happened yesterday.
Right,
You
right.
know? Yeah, or challenge yourself to. That seems really empowering. Thank you. Anyone else like to share? Jane, would you like to share? Is that how I say your name? Am I saying that correctly?
Jen, thanks for
Jen.
asking.
Yeah, Jen. Thank you. Is there anything you're thinking through?
I want to thank you for bringing in also, you know, the disruption, bringing in the disruptions of what life is like now. Like, I also too am interrupted with Minecraft questions from my child as I'm trying to dive deep into research and things. And so, you know, I think for a lot of the pandemic, I've been writing as escape, you know, like researching ancestors, researching the history, like, you know, thousands of years ago of what my family could have gone through. But I think maybe I was just writing, maybe the lens is that this time I'm kind of looking at it through, or I'm looking at those things, sort of processing those, the traumas, the absences in family history that I'm actually writing about now. I don't know, I kind of want to think more about that. And then I've also been struggling with like where to position myself within the narrative and where to find myself, because I get very lost in all of the ancestors, all of the history. And so, you know, yeah, bringing in that moment when Minecraft isn't working, you know, I don't know, like weaving those little moments. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Thank you. That sounds like an amazing project. It has me thinking of Brandon Shimoda's work. I don't know if you've read Brandon Shimoda. Okay, great. Yeah, like his book Ancestors on the Wall, Grave in the Wall, about his ancestors. Really. But that question too of like how to position yourself in the long arc of history and like among traditions and among people who were your kin but are strangers. Those are really interesting questions, you know. So I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. Thanks, man. Would anyone else like to share any questions that have come to you or any thoughts you've been having throughout this conversation? And thank you all for being so open to talk with each other. I don't know if you know each other or this is very trusting of you to talk with me. So thank you for doing that. But are there other questions you might like to think through in the last kind of 10-ish minutes that we have together? Anything, even if it feels slightly tangential and off topic, we could think through it together. Any questions come up while I was talking? So Glenn is busy and also saying, I think it's deeply troubling, the notion that we have to suffer to be an artist. Especially right this minute, please, like, I'm sorry, I'm already struggling. Like, I'm not going to suffer even more to be your artist. Like, jump off up here. I don't care to do that. This is an idea that I actually first heard from Hanif Abdurraqib, who's an amazing essayist and poet. And he was talking about how when writing his maybe 2 books ago, just felt like a real struggle and that he just suffered a lot while writing it. And he was like, I'm kind of done suffering for writing. And I was like, what is that idea? That was just really helpful for me, because I feel like my first book, Fear Icons, took me a decade and there was a lot of suffering involved in it. And I was like, yeah, what is it like to not suffer as much through the writing or to force it? And it's always going to be hard. I think writing for me is always hard, but that doesn't mean I have to dedicate myself to the pain. And I don't owe anyone that pain. And so one thing that I've talked about with my students is setting up boundaries and understanding what the limits are of what you want to write about. So let's say you're writing about your history with your mom, and it's a very complex history. You get to choose what you include and what you exclude, and to include the things you're ready for, that when you're done writing about them, they might make you feel sad. They might make you feel lots of things, but they don't make you feel small or depleted. That instead you feel like you have found words for something that you wanted to find words for, but that you don't owe anyone the deepest, most painful parts in order to sell a book or to have it read. That's not necessary, or it shouldn't be. And that's also cultural, right? That the writer's both a genius and one who suffers for their art. None of those things are true. In my mind, the writer is someone who just is persistent and makes choices, and hopefully learns to make choices that are sustaining as a creative being, because otherwise I don't know how to keep going. And it's a challenge. I have no real, I have goals there. I'm working on the strategies. So have any of you found ways to, and that's why I wanted to turn towards sustenance, of like what's sustaining you now? Turning to music, turning to friends, taking long walks like Stu's doing, like finding ways that you are pairing the work of writing with other things that really charge your battery as a creative being. Coming into conversations about your work that are meaningful, joining workshops where you feel like you are seen and heard and really read, and those workshops might not be the conventional style where you're over in the corner silent, handing out your pages and people are like, well, I want to hear more about the mother. Well, I'm happy for you. I want to eat cake, but I can't. I can't have gluten. So my point here is like what you want might not be what the essay wants, might not be what the story needs, might not be what the poem is asking for. It's just what that person, that's just revealing what that person wants. So finding a workshop and a workshop group too, and hopefully you'll be able to do that through, frankly, this program, of finding a cohort that talk with you about your work in ways that are catalyzing. Those are some of the things I'm practicing. So I've now just kept talking. What other thoughts are you having?
One of the things that I've done, thanks to the pandemic, is there have been so many readings online where I would have never been in Berkeley, California, or Long Island, or Chicago, wherever. And a great many of them free or donation based. And so I was able to attend some workshops at the Emily Dickinson Museum, and I was in a workshop with Jericho Brown. And if you want to get the joy of writing, man, listen to Jericho read or go to a workshop with him. I don't think he is ever down when he is presenting. He is just a very dynamic presenter. So find those people through the program, through the internet, because that will buoy your spirits, even if all you've written this week is a grocery list.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you.
This is entirely tangential, but last year I was able to go to the American Writers Museum in Chicago with a Cornell professor who had been one of my professors when I was a student. And they have a whole section about writers, just like as people, of who had different what kind of pet and how did they write? Like, did they write in their bed at 2 a.m. until 8 a.m. or did they work at 8 to 4 like a regular job or whatever the case may be? But I think it was for one a really like lighthearted and fun part of the museum to find out that like this author had a raccoon in her house that was known for biting her friends, and like or that they preferred to use this one very particular kind of pen, or they only took trains or things like that. And I think that was also kind of buoying for me, because so much of thinking about, I guess, writing in general, it does seem like the troubling notion that we have to suffer to do it. And I don't know, I know that's just entirely a tangent, but it was a really enjoyable experience. And there was one writer, and I wish I could remember who it was, who kept snails as pets, and she would secretly put them in her purse when she went to parties. And it just brought me great joy to think about that.
I would like to read that essay about those writers. And I love this idea too, Megan, of like writing your joy, like what gives you joy, and to write about things that are feeling joyful, and I'm thinking of Ross Gay's Book of Delights, right? Every single day, the project was to write down a delight, one thing that delighted him, which of course revealed the difficulties as well. Each of those delights is related to something difficult, something hard, right? But I love this idea of writing into joy and writing things that make you feel joy, which for some of us, like I'm writing fiction right now. Like I need to be in a space of play or to write at the monster, because the fact that it made a new leaf and didn't die gives me a lot of joy. And I think that's a site of resistance in this moment of suffering, is to have that joy and to locate it. So I wish to all of you good joy in writing. I hope that you find it, and let me know what you find. And I'll very quickly try to share this reading. I'm not sure it's going to work. No, it's not. So I'll share it to the Moodle. Yes.
I wanted to add on to what Megan said, because it made me think a lot of writers have rituals. They have certain things that they do, and some of it's, really precise. I will do this, and then I will do this, and I'll do this, and then I will go write. And it made me think that, with myself, I have to think of new rituals, because some of the existing ones don't really work, because of everything that's going on. So I have to find new ways of getting myself centered. And before I used to think of, writing just needed to have a time. I needed to be consistent. I needed to have it, right from such and such time to such and such time. And then someone pointed out that writing's also about place. You need to have a place and a space for your writing. Not, most definitely a physical space where nothing else can really intrude. It's your space to write. It's not, if it's the kitchen counter, then it has to be yours for a certain specific set of time. That's not being shared while you make dinner or whatever, or helping the kids with homework. It has to be, kind of a sacred space, so that you can create that environment. And one thing I also wanted to mention is I once studied about the psychology of creative people. And they talked about, for a lot of times people think of creative people as being somewhat crazy because they have, unusual habits, they display unusual behaviors, and they seem to kind of walk a line, between madness and creativity. And I think that's sometimes still the case, where you're kind of walking this line and you're trying to accomplish your creative goals, but yet you have to make sure you keep yourself balanced. And I think that's what it's all about, is finding some sort of balance so you can follow through on whatever you want to do with your creativity.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here. I'm also going to be teaching a generative workshop that will extend actually from this talk. Well, we will practice some generative techniques together to help write out of this time. And actually, I'm going to try and use some of the ideas y'all have shared with me today to help inform that workshop. So hopefully I'll see you there, but if not, that's cool. And thank you for being here. I'm just so thankful to get to spend some time thinking about this. I've been thinking a lot about this and for a long time, like years, but not able to really put into words like what this practice looks like and what exactly it means to write out of one's time. And so thank you for giving me the chance to do that. That was kind of what I was hoping to do with this talk. So yes, and so thank you. So if you would just mics on and we'll just all say thank you to each other and then I'll just say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. I'll see you all soon, I hope. Thank you. Oh, Paul, you're muted. What's up, Paul? Did you have something?
Who-
Yeah.
Did you do those quilts behind you, or what's the story about those?
Oh, the quilts. No, I did not. This one my great aunt did, and this one I think was at a thrift store that my mother-in-law gave me. They're beautiful though, aren't they? They keep me warm. I was showing Glenn, this is where I am. I'm in my basement. It's totally unfinished. So I hang them up to keep the heat in this little pocket. Yeah. Well, thanks
That's
for
really
joining us today, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
That's
Glenn.
great.
All right. I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.